The words cut through the morning air at Fort Carson like a blade through silk. Your husband's shadow won't protect you here, Lieutenant. 43 people stood watching. Cadets in formation, their faces blank slates. Instructors with clipboards pretending to be busy. Maintenance crew pausing mid-task, sensing blood in the water. The high desert sun hadn't fully risen yet, but the heat was already building. Colorado in late summer, dust devils dancing across the training yard. The Rocky Mountains standing witness in the distance. Lieutenant Kira Ashford held a single sheet of paper in her right hand. Medical exemption request for physical training. Her left hand hung loose at her side, fingers relaxed but not limp. She didn't respond to Colonel Marcus Brennan's declaration. She simply stood there, 5'7" in standard issue fatigues. Dark auburn hair pulled into a regulation bun so tight it could pass inspection from 20 paces. Face neutral as concrete. Marcus stepped closer, close enough that his breath fogged the space between them in the cool morning air. He was taller by half a foot, broader by 40 pounds of muscle earned through 2 decades of Delta Force deployments. His uniform bore the insignia of someone who'd climbed the ladder fast. Too fast, some whispered, though never loud enough for him to hear. He reached down and plucked the paper from Kira's hand. She let him take it. No resistance, no protest. Marcus held it up for the crowd to see. Then he opened his fingers. The paper floated down to the sand like a wounded bird finding earth. Physical issues, he read from memory, his voice dripping with theatrical sympathy. Health complications from traumatic stress. He turned to face the assembled troops, playing to his audience. You know what we called that in my day? He let the pause hang. A skilled performer. We called it being soft. A few nervous laughs rippled through the younger cadets, the ones who thought brown-nosing might save them when their own turn came. The older soldiers, the ones who'd seen actual combat, kept their faces blank. They'd learned long ago that silence was armor. Master Sergeant Thaddeus Mercer stood near the equipment shed, arms crossed over a chest decorated with 36 years of service ribbons. 61 years old, Gulf War veteran, Somalia, Afghanistan, 3 deployments to Iraq. They called him Stone. Had since Mogadishu 1993, when a piece of shrapnel the size of a quarter had lodged itself 2 inches from his spine, and he'd walked 3 miles to extraction without making a sound. The surgeons left it in, said removing it might paralyze him. He'd shrugged and said he'd carried heavier burdens. Stone didn't laugh at Marcus's joke. His eyes were fixed on Kira's stance, feet shoulder-width apart, weight distributed evenly, breathing steady and controlled. Something about the way she held herself made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. 36 years of combat instinct screaming a single word. Operator. Marcus wasn't finished. He circled Kira like a shark sensing blood in the water. Your husband was a good man, he said, voice softening just enough to sound sincere to the uninformed. A great SEAL. Team 5, if memory serves. He stopped directly in front of her face, inches from hers. But you're not him, are you? You're just the woman he left behind. Kira's eyes never left his. She took one breath, 4 seconds in through the nose, held it for 4 seconds, released it for 4 seconds through barely parted lips. The rhythm was precise, mechanical, like counting steps in a minefield. Marcus noticed the breathing pattern and mistook it for fear. That's when he struck. The elbow came fast. A short, brutal jab aimed at her solar plexus, but redirected at the last microsecond to her jaw. Not a slap, not a push, a full combat strike designed to drop an opponent. The kind of blow that ended bar fights and interrogations. The crack of bone on bone echoed across the yard. Kira's head snapped to the right. Her knees buckled. She hit the sand, hard landing on her left shoulder, dust rising around her like smoke from an explosion. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the wind seemed to pause. For 3 full seconds, nobody moved. Then came the whispers, urgent and scandalized. Did he just, oh my God, someone needs to... But nobody stepped forward. Not yet. Marcus stood over Kira's fallen form, hands on his hips, chest heaving slightly. Not from exertion, from satisfaction. The look of a man who'd just proven a point he'd been waiting months to make. Get up, he said quietly, or stay down and prove me right. Kira pushed herself to a sitting position. Sand clung to her left cheek where blood seeped from a split along her jawbone. She touched it once with 2 fingers, examined the red smear, then wiped it on her pant leg. No wincing, no tears. She planted her right hand flat in the sand, then her left, pushed up to her knees, then to her feet. The movement was fluid, efficient, not the scrambling recovery of someone stunned by violence. It looked rehearsed, practiced, like she'd done it 1,000 times before. Stone's eyes narrowed. He'd seen that kind of rising before. In Mogadishu, when Rangers took fire and kept moving because stopping meant dying. In Fallujah, when Marines got knocked down by IED concussions and stood back up because their brothers needed them. It was the rising of someone who'd been trained to take hits and keep functioning. Counselors didn't move like that. Kira stood at attention. Her jaw was already starting to swell, a dark bloom spreading beneath the skin. A single drop of blood traced a line down her neck and disappeared beneath her collar. Around her neck hung a pendant on a thin chain. Not the usual religious medallion or sentimental locket. This was cylindrical, brushed steel, about the size of a lipstick tube. It caught the light wrong, like it was made of something denser than decorative metal. Stone filed that detail away. Marcus looked disappointed that she'd stood. Nothing to say. No, sir, Kira replied. Her voice was steady, no tremor, no anger, flat as a frozen lake. Then get off my training field. She turned and walked toward the barracks. Not fast, not slow. Each step measured and deliberate. The crowd parted to let her through. Most wouldn't meet her eyes. A few of the women looked furious on her behalf, but none spoke up. Marcus watched her go, arms crossed, expression smug. When she disappeared around the corner of the admin building, he clapped his hands twice. Show's over. Formation in 5. We've got a course to run. The cadets scattered like startled birds. Stone remained where he was, staring at the spot where Kira had stood back up. Something nagged at him. A detail his subconscious had flagged, but his conscious mind hadn't processed yet. He walked over to the patch of sand where she'd fallen. There, pressed into the ground, was the outline of her left shoulder, but the way the sand displaced it wasn't the chaotic spray of someone thrown off balance. The impact pattern was controlled, almost like she'd rolled with the fall to distribute force, like someone trained to take hits and keep functioning, like an operator. Stone looked toward the admin building. Kira was gone, but he made a mental note to watch her more closely. Widows didn't move like that. Victims didn't breathe like that. And that pendant, he'd seen similar devices before, in places where communications needed to be encrypted and carried close. He shook his head and headed back to the shed. Probably nothing. Probably just a woman trying to hold it together after losing her husband. Probably. But Stone hadn't survived 36 years by ignoring his instincts. Inside the women's barracks bathroom, Kira stood at the sink with the door locked. She ran cold water over a clean cloth and pressed it against her jaw, watching her reflection with clinical detachment. The swelling would peak in about 4 hours. The bruise would turn spectacular colors over the next week. She'd had worse. Afghanistan 2019. Training accident that wasn't an accident. A staff sergeant who thought female rangers needed to be taught their place. She'd let him think he'd won, then reported him through proper channels with photographic evidence and witness statements. He was currently serving time at Leavenworth. She opened her mouth, tested the range of motion. No broken teeth, no fracture, just soft tissue damage. Acceptable. She pulled her phone from her pocket, not her personal device. A second one she kept in an inner pocket sealed with Velcro that didn't show up on metal detectors. Typed a short message. Contact made. Escalation confirmed. Standing by. Sent it to a number with no name attached. The message disappeared 3 seconds after sending, leaving no trace in the phone's memory. Kira set the phone down and leaned against the sink. Closed her eyes. Let herself take 5 breaths that weren't counted, weren't controlled. 5 breaths to be the widow everyone thought she was. Then she opened her eyes, splashed water on her face, and became the operative again. The next 24 hours passed in slow burning tension. Kira kept to herself, eating alone in the mess hall at odd hours when the crowd was thin. She attended the mandatory counseling sessions she was supposedly there to lead. Listening to young soldiers talk about stress and fear and the weight of carrying weapons. She nodded in the right places, asked gentle questions, took notes. Professional, competent, harmless. But around the base, in the spaces between official duties, the whispers grew louder. Marcus made sure of it. He stopped by tables in the mess hall, leaned in close to groups of soldiers, voice just loud enough to carry. Heard she's claiming PTSD from her husband's death. Wants special treatment. At the gym, he commented loudly while spotting a lieutenant on bench press. Some people joined to serve. Others joined to collect a check and play victim. In the motor pool, while inspecting vehicles, he made his assessment clear. Ashford, she'll be gone in a week. Can't handle real military life. The campaign was surgical. He never mentioned the punch, never acknowledged the violence. Instead, he painted Kira as fragile, opportunistic, undeserving. And it worked. By the end of day 2, most of the base had formed an opinion. The younger troops, the ones who worshipped Marcus's combat record, dismissed her entirely. The mid-level officers stayed neutral, unwilling to cross a colonel over someone they barely knew. Only a handful watched and said nothing. Stone. A couple of female instructors, one grizzled warrant officer who'd seen too much to accept simple narratives. Their silence was heavy with doubt. Kira felt the isolation like a physical thing, a bubble of empty space that moved with her through corridors and across the parade ground. She didn't fight it, didn't try to win hearts or correct rumors. She simply continued her routine. Wake at 0500, physical therapy exercises in her room, breakfast at 6:30, counseling sessions until lunch. Paperwork in the afternoon. Dinner at 1900. Lights out by 2200. The only deviation was the way she paused sometimes, standing near windows or in doorways, her eyes tracking movement across the base with the focus of someone mapping terrain. Stone noticed. On the third morning, he positioned himself near the mess hall entrance, pretending to read a maintenance report while Kira collected her breakfast tray. She moved through the line efficiently. Oatmeal, black coffee, one banana. No wasted motion. When she reached for the coffee pot, her grip wrapped around the handle with her thumb positioned over the top, fingers curled underneath. It was the hold of someone trained to control a weapon's recoil applied unconsciously to a coffee pot. Stone followed her at a distance as she carried her tray to a corner table. Watched the way she sat with her back to the wall facing the entrance. Saw how her eyes scanned the room in a pattern, left to right, near to far, exits first. He'd done the same thing for 3 decades. It was operator behavior, threat assessment. You didn't learn that in counseling school. He approached her table. Mind if I sit, Lieutenant? Kira looked up, assessed him in one glance. The way his hands hung, the old scar tissue on his knuckles, the way his eyes tracked movement without moving his head. Master Sergeant, she said, please. Stone set his tray down and lowered himself into the chair with the careful movements of a man whose knees remembered every parachute landing. They ate in silence for a minute, then he spoke, voice low enough that nearby tables couldn't hear. That's quite a bruise. Yes. You file a report? No. Why not? Kira took a sip of coffee, set the cup down precisely in the same spot it had been before. Because it wouldn't change anything, and because I have my reasons. Stone studied her face. The bruise had ripened into deep purple and yellow, a violent sunset across her jaw. She wore it without makeup, without shame, like it was just another part of her uniform. Your husband, he said carefully, Captain Dominic Ashford, SEAL Team 5, wasn't he? Something flickered in Kira's eyes, not pain, calculation. Yes. Lost him 2 years ago, Kandahar. Yes. That must have been hard. It was. Stone nodded slowly. He was fishing, trying to gauge whether grief or something else lived behind that controlled facade. I knew some Team 5 operators back in the day. Good men. Toughest training in the world. He paused. You ever spend time around the teams, learn any of their habits? Kira met his gaze directly. I learned that strong people don't need to prove it, and that silence is often the smartest strategy. It wasn't an answer, but it was a message. Back off, old man. You're getting too close. Stone heard it loud and clear. He finished his eggs, drained his coffee, and stood. Well, Lieutenant, if you ever need someone to talk to, someone who doesn't repeat things, you know where to find me. Thank you, Master Sergeant. As he walked away, Stone felt the weight of her gaze on his back. He'd been right. This woman was not what she appeared to be. The question was, what was she actually doing here? That afternoon, Marcus made his next move. He called Kira into his office. A converted storage room in the admin building with a desk, 2 chairs, and a window overlooking the obstacle course. She arrived exactly on time, knocked twice, waited for permission to enter. Marcus didn't look up from his paperwork for a full 30 seconds. A power play so obvious it would have been funny if the stakes weren't what they were. Sit, he finally said. Kira sat, hands folded in her lap, posture straight but not rigid. Marcus leaned back in his chair, making it creak. I've been reviewing your file, Ashford. Impressive credentials. Master's in psychology, certification in trauma counseling. 2 years with the VA. He closed the folder. But here's the thing. This isn't the VA. This is an active military base. And I need people who can keep up, physically and mentally. I understand, sir. Do you buy him? He tapped the folder. Because from where I'm sitting, you've been here 3 days and you're already causing problems. Rumors, distractions. My soldiers are supposed to be focused on training, not gossiping about some counselor who can't handle the environment. Kira said nothing. Marcus waited, hoping she'd defend herself, give him something to latch onto. When she didn't, he shifted tactics. I'm going to make this simple. Tomorrow morning, 0600, you're going to run the obstacle course with the cadets. Full combat load. If you complete it within standard time, you stay. If you don't, you request immediate transfer to a desk job somewhere safe and quiet. He smiled, thin and cold. I think that's fair, don't you? It wasn't fair. It was a trap. The obstacle course was brutal. Rope climbs, wall vaults, mud pits, cargo nets. Most new arrivals took weeks to build up the endurance and technique to finish within regulation time. Marcus was banking on Kira failing publicly, giving him grounds to remove her without triggering an official complaint. And if she refused to attempt it, that would be just as good. Either way, she'd be gone. Kira looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. Yes, sir, 0600, I'll be there. Marcus's smile widened. Outstanding. Dismissed. She stood, saluted, left. Marcus watched her go, satisfaction blooming warm in his chest. By this time tomorrow, the widow problem would be solved. He pulled out his phone and sent a group text to 5 of his most loyal officers. Ashford running obstacle course tomorrow, 600. Spread the word. Should be entertaining. By dinner, the entire base knew. The mess hall buzzed with speculation. Some felt bad for Kira, convinced she was being set up to fail. Others thought it was about time someone made her prove she belonged. A few, mostly the ones who'd seen combat, wondered why she'd agreed so easily. Running a course you weren't prepared for was suicide for your reputation, unless you had a reason to believe you'd succeed. Stone heard about it from a junior instructor who could barely contain his excitement. $50 says she doesn't make it past the rope climb, the kid said, grinning. Stone didn't take the bet. Instead, he made sure his schedule was clear for tomorrow morning. He had a feeling this was going to be more interesting than anyone expected. That night, Kira sat on her bunk with the door locked and the blinds closed. She'd removed the steel pendant from around her neck and turned it in her hands. The metal was warm from being pressed against her skin all day. She twisted the top half. It separated with a quiet click, revealing the hollow interior. Inside was a micro SD card, smaller than a fingernail. Waterproof, impact-resistant, rated to survive being run over by a tank. She plugged it into her secure phone and typed a message. Escalation to physical test. Proceeding as planned. Recommend surveillance on equipment. Shed 0500 to 0600 tomorrow. Sent it, waited. The reply came back in under a minute. Roger, eyes on. Stay sharp. She disconnected the device, sealed the pendant, hung it back around her neck. Then she laid down fully clothed on top of the covers and closed her eyes. Sleep came easily. It always did before a mission. At 0457 the next morning, the equipment shed was dark and silent. At 0459, the side door opened. A figure slipped inside, moving with confidence in the blackness. No flashlight, just hands that knew exactly where everything was stored. The figure located the gear bag labeled Ashford K and unzipped it. Inside was standard issue climbing equipment. Harness, carabiners, rope, gloves. The figure selected the 2 carabiners attached to the harness and examined them by feel. DMM Ultra O models, rated for 5,000 pounds. Used by mountain rescue teams and special operations units worldwide. Found the locking mechanism, a threaded sleeve that screwed down to prevent accidental opening. Loosened it 3/4 of a turn. Not enough to be obvious on visual inspection, but enough that under body weight and stress, the lock would fail. The figure zipped the bag, exited the shed, disappeared into pre-dawn darkness. 90 seconds start to finish. No witnesses, no cameras in that corner of the base. Perfect. Except for the microcamera mounted inside a ventilation grate, installed 2 nights ago by someone who knew exactly what to look for. The camera watched, recorded, transmitted the footage in real time to a server located 300 meters away. In a hotel room off base, Commander Garrett Holloway sat drinking bad coffee and taking notes. He was 42 years old, 15 years CID counterintelligence, and he'd seen every flavor of betrayal the military had to offer. But watching an officer sabotage equipment that could kill someone still made his blood run cold. He zoomed in on the figure's hands as they worked the carabiner, captured a clear frame showing the deliberate sabotage. The face was in shadow, but the hands were enough. The ring on the right index finger. The distinctive scar tissue on the left thumb. Marcus Brennan's hands. Holloway picked up his phone and sent a message. Evidence secured. Proceed. At Fort Carson, Kira's phone buzzed silently under her pillow. She checked it, read the message, deleted it, stood and dressed in her PDT uniform, laced her boots with the methodical care of someone who'd done it 10,000 times, checked her watch, 5:30, time to move. She stood at the window looking out at the base as it woke up, lights flickering on in barracks, the smell of breakfast cooking in the mess hall, soldiers beginning their routines. Somewhere out there, Marcus Brennan was sleeping soundly, convinced he'd won, convinced that in 90 minutes, Kira Ashford would fail publicly and disappear from his life. She reached up and touched the pendant at her throat. Inside it, beneath the micro SD card, was something else. Something she hadn't looked at in 2 weeks because looking at it made her hands shake. A photo, small enough to fit in the hollow cylinder, faded at the edges. Dominic Ashford on their wedding day, in his dress blues, smiling that smile that could light up a room. She'd added the photo 3 months ago, before she'd accepted this assignment, before she'd walked into Fort Carson pretending to be broken. It was her reminder, not of what she'd lost, but of why she was here. Kira closed her eyes and let herself remember, just for 60 seconds, what it felt like to wake up next to warmth instead of mission parameters, to plan vacations instead of operations, to be someone's wife instead of someone's weapon. The grief was real. The love had been real. But underneath, both colder and harder, was the fury that came from knowing how Dominic had died. Not in combat, not with honor, abandoned by the man who now sat in a comfortable office 300 yards away, wearing medals he didn't deserve. 60 seconds passed. Kira opened her eyes, put the lid back on that box, locked it away, became the operative again. She checked her phone one more time. No new messages. Everything was in place. The trap had been set 3 months ago. Now it was time to spring it. She walked to the door, paused with her hand on the knob, whispered to the empty room, to the ghost of the man who'd taught her how to climb, how to fight, how to survive. For you, Dom, watch me work. Then she opened the door and stepped out into the Colorado dawn. The obstacle course at 0600 was not the quiet morning training session Marcus had advertised. Word had spread like wildfire through the barracks, whispered in mess hall lines, texted between friends, posted on internal message boards. By the time Kira arrived, over 70 people had gathered around the perimeter of the training yard. Cadets in PT gear bouncing on their toes to stay warm in the pre-dawn chill. Instructors with coffee cups, faces carefully neutral. Support staff who'd found reasons to be nearby. Even a few officers from other units who'd heard the rumors and wanted to see the spectacle. Marcus stood near the starting line, arms crossed, looking pleased with the turnout. He'd positioned this as entertainment, and the crowd had delivered. Kira approached alone. No supporters, no allies. She wore standard PT gear. Gray army shirt, black shorts, running shoes that had seen better days. Her dark auburn hair was braided tight against her scalp. The bruise on her jaw had faded to a sickly green-yellow that looked worse in the harsh morning light. She stopped in front of Marcus and stood at attention. "Ready, Lieutenant?" His voice carried, projecting to the crowd like an actor on stage. "Yes, sir." "Good." He gestured to the course laid out behind him. "Regulation time is 12 minutes. You've got 15 because I'm feeling generous." He pointed to each obstacle in sequence, making a show of it. "First, you've got the hurdles, then the rope climb 30 feet. After that, the wall vault 12 feet of timber, no handholds. Then the mud crawl 50 feet under barbed wire. Finally, the cargo net 40 feet up and over. Finish line is at the far end." He paused, letting the crowd absorb the scope of it. "You'll be carrying full combat load. That's an M4 carbine replica, 10 pounds, plus a rucksack, 35 pounds total. Any questions?" "No, sir." "Then let's see what you've got." He raised his hand, paused for dramatic effect, then dropped it. "Go." Kira moved, not sprinting, not rushing. She approached the first obstacle, a series of low hurdles set at 18 inches at a controlled jog. The M4 replica across her chest. The rucksack settled properly on her shoulders, weight distributed through her hips. She cleared the hurdles with economical movements. No wasted energy. The low crawl technique from Ranger School, body close to the ground, hips driving forward. Each hurdle a fluid motion that conserved momentum. The crowd watched, waiting for her to falter. She didn't. She reached the rope climb. The first major test. A 30-foot vertical rope hung from a steel frame swaying slightly in the breeze. Manila rope, 1.5 inch diameter, the kind that tore up your hands if you weren't careful. Below it, a safety mat that would do absolutely nothing if you fell from the top. Stone stood near the back of the crowd, eyes locked on Kira's gear bag sitting open near the start line. He'd watched her collect it from the shed at 0545. watched her do a quick visual check of the equipment, but you couldn't see a loosened carabiner lock just by looking. You'd only know when it failed. Kira pulled on her climbing harness, standard issue black nylon webbing with steel D-rings. She attached the carabiners with practiced efficiency, DMM Ultra O models. Oval-shaped, screw-lock gates rated for 5,000 pounds of force. She clipped into the primary rope and the secondary safety line, a 3/8-inch steel cable that ran parallel to the main rope. Most climbers ignored the secondary. It was backup meant for emergencies only, the crowd murmured. Someone near the front said, "She actually knows how to use that stuff." Marcus frowned slightly. This wasn't part of the script he'd imagined. Kira gripped the rope, placed her boots against it in the proper footlock position, legs creating friction, arms pulling, and began to climb. Hand over hand, smooth and rhythmic, not fast but steady, the kind of pace you could maintain for hours if you had to. 10 feet, 20 feet. The rope swayed with her weight, the morning breeze pushing her slightly off vertical. She was halfway up when the first carabiner lock slipped. The metallic click was almost inaudible under the morning wind. But Kira felt it, a sudden looseness in the safety line that shouldn't be there. The carabiner gate starting to rotate open under stress. Her training kicked in faster than thought. Without hesitation, she released the primary rope with her left hand and grabbed the secondary safety line, the steel cable that ran parallel. Her right hand maintained grip on the main rope as her body weight shifted. The crowd gasped. It looked like she was about to fall, her body swinging out from the rope, legs losing their grip. For a split second, she was suspended between 2 points of contact, neither fully secure. Stone's heart slammed against his ribs. "Grab the secondary," he shouted, but she'd already done it. Kira's fingers wrapped around the backup cable with the precision of someone who'd trained for exactly this scenario. Not fumbling, not panicking, just executing a drill she'd performed hundreds of times until it became reflex. She hung suspended for 2 seconds, legs swinging, the compromised carabiner dangling uselessly from her harness gate fully open, now held on only by the rope passing through it. Then she pulled herself up using the secondary line alone. Raw upper body strength. No leg assist. Just arms and back and core muscles trained for this exact moment. Hand over hand up the steel cable. The crowd watching in stunned silence as she climbed the remaining 15 feet like she was pulling herself out of a grave. She reached the top of the frame, touched the bell that marked completion, the clear ring echoing across the training yard, then descended using the backup line, exclusively ignoring the sabotaged equipment entirely. When her boots hit the ground, the crowd was silent, stunned. That wasn't luck. That was skill, muscle memory, the kind of recovery you only performed if you drilled it hundreds of times until it became reflex. Marcus's face had gone pale. How did you? Kira unclipped the harness and let it fall to the ground. The loosened carabiner was now visible to anyone who cared to look. Hanging wrong, lock clearly compromised, the gate swinging freely on its hinge. She didn't point it out, didn't need to. Stone was already walking toward it, his expression dark as a thunderstorm. He picked up the harness, examined the equipment with the careful attention of someone who'd inspected gear for 3.5 decades, turned the carabiner over in his hands, tested the lock mechanism, then looked at Marcus with something cold and dangerous in his eyes. "This carabiner's been tampered with," Stone said loudly, making sure everyone heard. "Lock's been loosened, 3/4 of a turn, maybe more. She should have fallen." The crowd erupted, voices overlapping, accusations flying. Who had access? This is sabotage. Someone tried to kill her. Marcus stepped forward, hands raised, playing the reasonable authority figure. "Now hold on, that's a serious claim." "It's a serious fact," Stone snapped. He held up the carabiner for the crowd to see. The lock sleeve was clearly backed off from its safety position. "Someone sabotaged this gear. And since Lieutenant Ashford is the only person scheduled to use it this morning, I'd say someone wanted her to get hurt." He turned to face the crowd voice carrying across the training yard. "Who had access to the equipment shed between midnight and 0500? Nobody answered. Marcus's jaw worked like he was chewing glass. "This is ridiculous. Gear malfunctions happen all the time. Equipment gets old, locks wear out. I check every piece of equipment in that shed personally." Stone interrupted, his voice cutting through Marcus's excuses like a blade through paper. "I checked these carabiners 2 days ago. They were fine. Lock mechanisms properly tightened. Safety protocols followed." He looked at Kira. "You do a pre-climb inspection, Lieutenant." Kira nodded, still catching her breath from the climb. "Visual only, Master Sergeant." The compromise wasn't obvious to the naked eye, but you knew to grab the secondary line. Yes, that's not standard training. That's advanced rescue technique, the kind of thing the special operations teaches. Where'd you learn it? Kira said nothing, just stood there, blood from her earlier injury starting to seep again from the exertion of the climb, breathing controlled, face unreadable. The crowd watched her like she'd just performed a magic trick they couldn't figure out. Marcus looked between her and Stone, realizing he was losing control of the narrative. His carefully orchestrated humiliation was turning into something else entirely, something that made him look like the villain. "Everyone back to morning duties," Marcus barked, trying to regain authority. "Show's over. Ashford, my office, now." "Respectfully, sir," Kira said quietly, "I'd like to complete the course." Marcus stared at her like she'd just spoken in a foreign language. "You're not serious." "You gave me 15 minutes, sir. I've used 6. She picked up a pair of work gloves from the gear bag, pulled them on with deliberate care. "I'd like to finish." The crowd held its breath. This was insane. She'd just survived sabotage and she wanted to keep going. Wanted to prove something that nobody was asking her to prove anymore. Marcus's options were limited. If he stopped her now, it would look like he was afraid of what she might prove, afraid that she was actually capable. If he let her continue and she completed the course, he'd have to acknowledge she belonged here. Either way, he was cornered. "Fine," he said through clenched teeth. "Finish." Kira walked to the wall vault. 12 feet of vertical timber, smooth boards with no handholds, no rope, just height and the need to get over it. She backed up 10 paces, then ran, hit the wall at speed, planted her left foot halfway up using momentum and the tap and pull method they taught at Ranger School. Pushed off, grabbed the top edge with both hands, hauled herself over in one smooth motion, dropped to the other side, rolled to absorb impact, came up running. The crowd started to wake up, a few scattered claps breaking out. Quiet at first, then building. She hit the mud crawl. 50 feet of barbed wire stretched over ankle-deep mud. Concertina wire with genuine barbs that would tear flesh if you weren't careful. Kira dropped to her belly and moved like a snake. Elbows and knees driving her forward. Head down, hips low. The technique drilled into her at Fort Benning. Don't rush, don't rise. Smooth as fast. She emerged at the far end covered in dirt. Face streaked, uniform soaked through, but moving. The cargo net loomed ahead. 40 feet of rope in a diamond pattern stretched between 2 steel poles. Climb it like you mean it or fall trying. She climbed it like she'd been doing it her whole life, over the top, down the other side. Sprint to the finish line. She crossed it with 4 minutes to spare, 11 minutes 47 seconds. Within regulation, the crowd exploded. Cheering, whistling, cadets pumping fists in the air. Even some of the ones who doubted her couldn't help but react to the sheer determination on display. A few of the female soldiers were openly crying, not from sadness, from something else. Recognition, maybe, or hope. Stone was grinning, a rare sight on his weathered face. Marcus looked like he'd swallowed a live grenade. Kira walked back to the start line, breathing hard but steady. Stopped in front of Marcus. Came to attention despite the mud and exhaustion. 11 minutes, 47 seconds, sir. Within regulation. Marcus couldn't speak. His face was red, veins standing out on his neck. Fists clenched so tight his knuckles had gone white. Finally, he managed 4 words. "Get cleaned up, office, 1 hour." "Yes, sir." As Kira walked toward the barracks, Stone fell into step beside her, kept his voice low enough that only she could hear. "That was one hell of a performance, Lieutenant." "Thank you, Master Sergeant. You mind telling me where you learned to climb like that? Because I've seen a lot of soldiers in my time. And that secondary line grab was textbook special operations." Kira glanced at him, saw the question behind the question, decided to give him a slice of truth. "My husband taught me, said it might save my life someday." Smart man. He was. They reached the barracks door. Stone stopped. "Listen," he said carefully, "I don't know what's going on here, but that gear didn't loosen itself. And you handled that rope failure like you've trained for it specifically. Like you knew it was coming." Kira met his eyes, held his gaze without blinking. "If someone's trying to hurt you," Stone continued, "you need to report it officially, file a complaint, get an investigation started." "I appreciate the concern, Master Sergeant, but I'm exactly where I need to be." She went inside. Stone stood on the steps staring at the closed door, feeling like he'd just glimpsed the edge of something massive, something lurking beneath still water. He pulled out his phone and typed a message to his old contact. The one who'd run initial background checks for him over the years. Need more information on Kira Ashford. Everything you've got. Call me. The response came back in 30 seconds. Already digging deeper. You'll want to sit down for this one. Call you in 10. Stone pocketed his phone and walked back toward the equipment shed, his mind racing. 36 years of instinct told him he was standing in the middle of something bigger than a harassment case. Much bigger. Kira stood in the barracks shower letting scalding water wash mud and blood down the drain. Her jaw throbbed where Marcus's elbow had connected 3 days ago. A steady pulse that kept time with her heartbeat. She pressed her thumb against the swelling, testing the pain threshold. Still tender, but functional. Everything was functional. That's what mattered. She dried off, dressed in a clean uniform, checked her secure phone. One message waited, package delivered, asset in position. Green light for phase 2. She deleted it, tucked the phone away. 45 minutes until she had to report to Marcus's office. Enough time for what needed to happen next. She left the barracks and walked across the quad toward the junior enlisted housing. Found the building she was looking for. 3rd floor, room 314. Knocked twice. The door opened. A young woman stood there. 22 years old, blonde hair pulled back, eyes red, like she'd been crying recently. Private Lennox Hayes, 2nd-year cadet, smart, capable, broken by the same system that was supposed to protect her. Lieutenant Ashford. Lennox's voice was hesitant, surprised. May I come in, Private? Lennox stepped aside. Kira entered, closed the door behind her. The room was standard military issue. 2 bunks, 2 desks, 2 lockers. Lennox's roommate was gone. Good. This conversation needed privacy. I saw what happened this morning, Lennox said. At the obstacle course. Everyone's talking about it. I'm sure they are. The way you climbed that rope after the equipment failed, that was incredible. Kira sat on the edge of the empty bunk, gestured for Lennox to sit across from her. Private Hayes, I need to talk to you about Colonel Brennan. Lennox's face went pale. I don't know what you mean. Yes, you do. Kira kept her voice gentle, non-threatening, the same tone she used in counseling sessions, but with an edge of steel underneath. 2 weeks ago, he called you to his office, asked you to stay late, made suggestions about mentorship and career advancement. Got too close, touched your shoulder. Lennox's hand started shaking. How did you? Because he follows a pattern, and you're not the first. Tears started rolling down Lennox's face. I didn't know what to do. He's a colonel. I'm just a private. Nobody would believe me. I believe you. But he said if I reported it, he'd ruin my career. Said I'd be the one who got in trouble for making false accusations. And I've seen it happen before. Women who speak up and get destroyed for it. Kira reached across the space between them. Didn't touch Lennox, just held her hand out, palm up. An offer, not a demand. Lennox took it. What's happening to you is wrong, Kira said quietly. What he did is wrong and it's going to be addressed, but I need you to trust me. Why should I? Because I'm not going to let him hurt you again, or anyone else. Wow. Lennox searched Kira's face, looking for something, truth maybe, or just someone who gave a damn. What do you need me to do? Write down everything that happened, dates, times, what he said, what he did, every detail you can remember, and I need you to be willing to give a statement if asked. To who? To the people who are going to make sure Marcus Brennan never wears that uniform again. Lennox pulled her hand back, wiped her eyes, straightened her shoulders. Okay, I'll do it. Kira stood. Write it tonight. Put it in a sealed envelope. Give it to Master Sergeant Mercer tomorrow morning. Tell him I sent you. He'll know what to do with it. The sergeant, Major Stone. Yes, you can trust him. After Kira left, Lennox sat at her desk and pulled out a notebook. Her hands were still shaking, but she started writing anyway. Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is tell the truth. Kira walked to Marcus's office, arriving exactly at the 1-hour mark. Knocked twice. Waited. Enter. She stepped inside. Marcus sat behind his desk, fingers steepled, face carved from stone. He didn't offer her a seat. She stood at attention. Neither spoke for 10 seconds. He was trying to intimidate her with silence. It didn't work. That was quite a show this morning, Marcus finally said. His voice was controlled, but barely, like a man holding a grenade with the pin pulled. You want to explain how you knew to grab that secondary line? Training, sir. What kind of training? The thorough kind. Marcus's jaw clenched. He stood abruptly, chair scraping back, walked around the desk until he was 3 feet from her, close enough to loom, far enough to maintain plausible deniability. You're playing games, Ashford. I don't appreciate games. I'm not playing anything, sir. You set a standard. I met it. He stepped closer, invaded her personal space in a way that would make any normal person step back. Kira didn't move. Let me be crystal clear, Marcus said, voice dropping to a near whisper. I don't care what skills you think you have. I don't care who your husband was. You don't belong here. He leaned in, close enough that she could smell the coffee on his breath. This base runs on discipline and strength, not sympathy for people who can't handle the reality of military life. Kira's expression didn't change. Is there anything else, sir? Marcus wanted to hit her again. She could see it in the micro-tension around his eyes, the way his right hand curled into a fist, then released. But they weren't alone on a training field now. They were in his office, where assault would be harder to excuse, so he settled for leaning closer. Voice dropping to a whisper meant to cut. I know why you're really here. You think if you tough it out, prove yourself, it'll bring him back somehow. Fill the hole he left. He paused, watching for a reaction. But it won't. He's dead. And you're just embarrassing his memory by pretending to be something you're not. It was designed to wound, to find the emotional pressure point and press until something broke. Kira looked at him with eyes like frozen lakes and said, Permission to speak freely, sir. Granted. You didn't know my husband, you don't know me, and you have no idea what I'm capable of. She let that hang in the air for 3 seconds. Is that all, sir? Marcus's face flushed dark red. Get out. Kira saluted, turned, left. Behind her, she heard something hit the wall. A coffee mug, probably, shattering into ceramic shrapnel. She kept walking, face neutral, while inside cold satisfaction bloomed. He was rattled, making mistakes, losing control. That's exactly what she needed. Stone was waiting for her outside the admin building, leaning against the wall in a patch of shade. When he saw her, he straightened. Walk with me, Lieutenant. They headed toward the perimeter road. Away from buildings, away from ears. When they were alone, Stone spoke. I talked to my contact, the one who runs background checks. He glanced at her. Turns out there's a lot more to your file than a master's degree and some VA time. Kira kept walking. Is that so? Clearance levels that would make most generals jealous. A file notation that says any interference with your activities should be reported immediately to Commander Garrett Holloway, CID Counterintelligence Division. He stopped walking, turned to face her. You want to tell me what's really going on here? Kira studied him. This old soldier with his ribbons and scars and 3 decades of knowing when someone was lying to him. She'd been planning to keep him at arm's length, use him as a witness if needed, but nothing more. But plans changed, and Stone had just proven he was smart enough to be useful. What do you know about Somalia? She asked. Stone's eyes narrowed. I was there, 93, Mogadishu. Why? You knew Colonel Vance, Marcus Brennan's mentor. I knew of him. He was one of the commanders who made the call to pull back. Left Rangers pinned down in the city. Some of them didn't make it out. He taught Marcus everything he knows, including how to abandon your team and make it look like tactical necessity. Stone's face went hard. You're saying, Marcus, 2 years ago, Kandahar, my husband and 4 others were holding a position, waiting for air support. Marcus was the commanding officer. He ordered a withdrawal, said air support was denied. It wasn't. How do you know? Kira reached up and touched the pendant at her throat. Because Dominic's helmet cam had a backup battery. It kept recording for 47 seconds after he thought it had died. Those 47 seconds show Marcus retreating, show the radio communications, show the lie. Stone absorbed this. So you came here to what? Get revenge? I came here to get justice. There's a difference. Not much of one when you're letting yourself get beat up to make a case. The bruises heal. The truth doesn't. Stone shook his head. You're either the bravest person I've ever met or the most reckless. Haven't figured out which. Maybe both. A ghost of a smile crossed Stone's weathered face. Your husband. He taught you more than climbing, didn't he? He taught me that patience is a weapon, and that the best traps are the ones your enemy builds for themselves. Smart man. The best. Before Stone could respond, both their phones buzzed simultaneously. Kira pulled hers out. Secure message. Assembly called for tomorrow, 0800. Brennan making his move. Prepare for final phase. She looked at Stone. Tomorrow morning, it ends. You sure you're ready for this? Kira thought about Dominic, about Lennox Hayes, about every person Marcus had hurt or would hurt if someone didn't stop him. I've been ready for 2 years. They walked back toward the base in silence. The sun climbing higher, the day heating up. Tomorrow would bring the reckoning that had been building since the moment Marcus made the decision to save himself and abandon 5 men to die. Kira touched her pendant one more time. Tomorrow, Dominic. Tomorrow he answers for what he did to you. The mandatory assembly was called for 0800 the next morning. Word spread through the base like electricity through a wire. Every soldier, every officer, every support staff member, no exceptions. The parade ground, full dress uniform. Marcus had sent the order out at 2100 the previous night. Short notice. Deliberate. Giving people just enough time to wonder, but not enough time to organize resistance. By 0745, over 200 personnel had gathered in formation. Perfect lines. Perfect spacing. The kind of military precision that looked good in photographs and hid everything ugly underneath. Marcus stood on the raised platform normally reserved for change of command ceremonies and retirement speeches. He wore his dress uniform. Every ribbon in place. Every crease sharp enough to draw blood. The bronze star catching morning sunlight. He looked like what he'd spent 20 years pretending to be. A hero. Kira stood in the back row of the formation. Hands at her sides, eyes forward. The bruise on her jaw had faded to a pale yellow shadow. In 48 hours, it would be gone completely. Like it had never happened. She'd learned a long time ago that some scars don't show on the surface. Stone stood with the senior enlisted, far enough from Kira to avoid obvious association, close enough to move fast if needed. His face was carved from granite, 36 years of military bearing, keeping his expression neutral even as his gut churned. He'd made 3 phone calls last night, to people he trusted, people who'd been with him in Mogadishu when commanders made bad calls and good soldiers paid the price. They were watching, waiting, just in case. Marcus tapped the microphone twice. The metallic thump echoed across the parade ground. The low conversations died. 200 faces turned toward the platform. I want to address something that's been disrupting this base, Marcus began. His voice carried authority. Command presence. The kind of tone that made young soldiers want to follow and old soldiers remember why they'd stayed in. There's been a lot of talk lately, rumors, distractions, gossip that has no place in a professional military environment. He paused, let the words settle. Lieutenant Kira Ashford came to Fort Carson 3 months ago under the guise of serving as a counselor. Someone to help our soldiers process stress and trauma. A valuable role, an important mission. Another pause. He was good at this, the rhythm, the pacing. But her actions since arriving have generated nothing but problems. Complaints about special treatment, questions about her fitness for duty, disruptions to training. My soldiers are supposed to be focused on readiness, not gossiping about some counselor who can't handle the environment she volunteered for. Kira stood perfectly still. Her breathing was controlled. 4 counts in, 4 counts hold, 4 counts out. The tactical breathing that kept snipers calm when targets were moving and margins were thin. Therefore, Marcus continued, effective immediately, Lieutenant Ashford will be reassigned to administrative duties pending a full review of her conduct. She will no longer participate in physical training. She will not interact with cadets. She will confine her activities to her office until this review is complete. He looked directly at Kira across the sea of uniforms. This decision is final. The parade ground erupted in whispers, some approving, some shocked, most just uncomfortable. Nobody liked watching someone get destroyed publicly, but nobody wanted to be next. Marcus opened his mouth to continue, to drive the nail deeper, to make sure everyone understood that questioning his authority came with consequences. That's when the voice cut across the parade ground with the weight of federal authority. Colonel Brennan, every head turned. Commander Garrett Holloway walked across the parade ground with measured steps. 4 CID agents flanked him, 2 on each side, all of them in dress uniforms, all of them wearing sidearms. The formation parted to let them through. Holloway was 42 years old with 15 years in counterintelligence. He'd investigated everything from espionage to war crimes. He'd taken down generals and senators and defense contractors. He'd seen every flavor of corruption the military had to offer. But watching officers destroy the people who trusted them never got easier. He stopped at the base of the platform, looked up at Marcus. Commander Holloway, Marcus said, recovering quickly, forcing his voice to stay level. This is unexpected. I'm aware of what you're in the middle of, Colonel. I'm going to need you to step down from that platform. This is highly irregular. I'm conducting official. Step down, sir. Holloway's voice wasn't loud. Didn't need to be. It carried the weight of federal authority and 15 years of not taking no for an answer. Now, something in Holloway's tone made refusal impossible. Marcus descended the platform steps. His face was pale, confusion giving way to the first flickers of real fear. "What's this about?" he asked quietly, trying to keep the conversation private. Holloway turned to address the assembled troops instead. "I apologize for the interruption," he said, voice carrying across the parade ground. "What you're about to witness is the result of a 3-month counterintelligence operation. I need everyone to remain in formation. Do not leave. Do not interfere." He looked at Marcus, pulled a folded document from his jacket pocket. "Colonel Marcus Brennan, you are hereby placed under arrest for dereliction of duty, falsifying official reports, destruction of government property, assault on a federal operative, and conduct unbecoming an officer." The parade ground exploded. Shouts, gasps, soldiers breaking formation despite orders. 200 voices trying to process what they just heard. Officers looking at each other. Enlisted personnel confused and angry and scared. Marcus staggered back like he'd been hit. "That's insane. I don't know what lies Ashford has been feeding you, but—" "Lieutenant Ashford," Holloway said, cutting him off, "is not just a counselor." He nodded to one of the agents who pulled out a tablet. "She's the founder of Phantom Reckoning, a counterintelligence unit that investigates suspected betrayal within special operations. She's been operating under deep cover for 90 days. The parade ground went silent. Every eye turned to Kira. She stepped forward, walked through the formation. Soldiers moving aside to let her pass. Her footsteps the only sound in the sudden quiet. When she reached the front, she stopped, turned to face the assembled base. Then she reached up and pulled down the collar of her uniform. On her left shoulder, dark ink against pale skin. A tattoo, large enough to be visible from 20 yards. A phoenix rising from ashes with 12 stars arranged in a circle around it. The insignia of Phantom Reckoning. The crowd gasped. It wasn't a decorative tattoo. It was a unit designation, the kind of marking that operators wore to identify each other in classified contexts. SEAL teams had them, Delta Force had them, Rangers had them, and now everyone knew Kira had one too. Stone stepped forward from the senior enlisted ranks, recognition dawning on his weathered face. "I've seen those marks before," he said loudly, "on SEAL teams, on Delta operators, on people who live in shadows and hunt monsters." Marcus's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out with shaking hands. The screen displayed an alert, automated, triggered by facial recognition software monitoring the base. "Security breach detected. Phantom Reckoning operative identified at Fort Carson. Immediate stand-down required." The message had been sent the moment Kira's tattoo came into view, captured by surveillance cameras. Processed by Department of Defense Systems. Flagged for immediate action, it was proof. Incontrovertible. Digital. Time-stamped. Marcus looked from the phone to Kira. For the first time, he saw her for what she really was. Not a victim, not a widow playing dress-up, a hunter who'd been circling him for months, waiting for him to provide enough rope to hang himself. "You," he whispered, "this whole time. Everything. The exemption request, the obstacle course." "Yes," Kira said. Her voice was calm, but underneath it ran a current of frozen steel. "3 months ago, I requested this assignment. Came to your base under false pretenses. Let you think I was weak, broken, easy to intimidate." She took 3 steps forward, close enough that he could see the cold fury in her eyes. "Every insult, every threat, every time you tried to break me, you were building my case. I didn't need to hunt you, Colonel. I just needed you to be yourself." Holloway held up the tablet, turned it toward the crowd. "We have footage of Colonel Brennan tampering with climbing equipment. IP logs linking him to online harassment campaigns. Testimony from 12 witnesses about assault and intimidation, including a detailed statement from Private Lennox Hayes regarding sexual harassment and retaliation." A ripple went through the crowd. Lennox stood straighter, chin up, no longer hiding. Holloway swiped to a new screen. "And we have this." The tablet displayed video, helmet camera footage. Grainy and jerking. Desert terrain. The sound of gunfire. Every soldier in the formation knew what they were looking at. Combat footage. A firefight. 5 soldiers pinned down behind a low wall. Enemy fire coming from multiple directions. The camera was mounted on someone's helmet, showing what they saw, what they experienced. Radio crackle. Then a voice, clear and commanding. "Viper 1, withdraw now, that's an order." Marcus's voice, unmistakable. The camera panned right, showed the 5 soldiers. One of them looked directly at the lens. Captain Dominic Ashford, SEAL Team 5. Kira's husband. He shook his head. Sir, we can hold. We need air support. ETA is 3 minutes. We can. The radio cut out. The camera showed a figure retreating toward an extraction point, moving fast, away from the fight, away from the 5 men who trusted him to make the right call. 30 seconds of running, then the screen went white, explosion. When the camera came back online, all it showed was smoke and dust and the ruins of the wall where 5 men had been. The silence on the parade ground was absolute. Every person present understood what they'd just witnessed. Not tactics, not the fog of war, not a difficult decision made under pressure. Abandonment. Marcus's face had gone gray, sweat beading on his forehead, his knees buckled. He dropped to the ground, hands sinking into the dirt. You weren't supposed to know, he said, voice barely audible. The files were sealed. It was classified. You weren't supposed to. But I did know, Kira said. She crouched down to his level, voice soft and lethal. My husband's helmet cam had a backup battery, military issue, rated for 72 hours. It kept recording for 47 seconds after primary power failed. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the steel pendant, opened it with a twist. Inside, visible to everyone watching, was a micro SD card. Those 47 seconds showed everything: where you went, what you said, who you left to die. She stood, looked down at him. You wanted me gone because I reminded you of what you did. But I stayed, not to forgive, not to heal. I stayed to make sure you face every name you left behind. Marcus's hands covered his face. His shoulders shook. The CID agents moved in, pulled him to his feet, secured his hands behind his back with flex cuffs. Holloway read him his formal rights. The words droning, mechanical and official. Miranda warnings that had been spoken 10,000 times in 10,000 arrests. But Kira barely heard it. Her focus was on the crowd. The faces showing shock and betrayal and vindication and shame. 200 people processing the fact that someone they'd trusted to lead them had abandoned 5 men to save himself. Then something unexpected happened. Private Lennox Hayes stepped forward from the junior enlisted ranks, came to attention, and saluted Kira. Not because regulations demanded it, because she'd witnessed something that mattered. A woman who'd endured hell, stayed silent, and emerged holding the evidence that would burn her tormentor down. Then another soldier saluted, a female corporal, then 5 more, a lieutenant, a specialist, a sergeant. Within 30 seconds, half the women in the formation were saluting Kira. Kira returned the salute, held it for a 3 count. Her throat tight with something she hadn't expected to feel. Hope, maybe, or recognition that she wasn't alone. She dropped the salute and stepped back. The CID agents loaded Marcus into an armored transport, black SUV with government plates. He looked back at Kira one last time through the tinted window. She stared back, face neutral, eyes cold. The transport drove away, dust hanging in the air like ghosts. Holloway dismissed the formation. Soldiers scattered, conversations erupting. Everyone trying to process what they'd just seen. Some angry, some relieved. All of them changed in ways they didn't fully understand yet. Stone approached Kira as the crowd dispersed. His face was unreadable. Lieutenant Ashford, he said quietly, or whatever your real assignment is. Why didn't you tell me? Kira turned to face him. Because if I had Master Sergeant, you would have tried to protect me. And I needed Brennan to believe I was vulnerable. Needed him to attack. How many times have you done this? 5 operations before this one. This was number 6. Stone shook his head slowly. That's one hell of a price to pay. Letting yourself get hurt. Letting people think you're weak. Living a lie for months. Cheaper than letting them go free. Stone looked at her closely. Really looked. Past the uniform and the tattoo and the ice-cold exterior. Because I've seen what carrying missions does to people. Seen operators burn out. Seen them lose themselves in the work. You sure you know where Kira Ashford ends and the operative begins? Kira didn't answer right away. She thought about the question. About the line between justice and revenge. About whether she was hunting monsters or becoming one. I'm sure, she finally said, that 5 men died because Marcus Brennan chose his career over their lives. And I'm sure that if I don't stop people like him, more will die. Stone nodded slowly. Your husband. He knew what you'd become, didn't he? Knew you'd do this. He helped train me, taught me how to take a hit, how to climb, how to survive. He always said the best operators aren't the strongest. They're the ones willing to bleed longer than their enemies can watch. Smart man. The best. Lennox Hayes approached hesitantly. She'd been crying. Her eyes were red, but her shoulders were straight. Ma'am, she said, I wanted to thank you for what you did, for stopping him. Kira looked at the young soldier, saw herself 5 years ago, before Dominic, before Ranger School, before she'd learned that sometimes the only way to get justice was to walk through fire. You don't need to thank me, Private. You saved yourself when you spoke up, when you wrote down what happened and gave that statement. That took real courage. But you made sure he couldn't hurt me again, couldn't hurt anyone. That's my job. What happens now to me, I mean? Kira put a hand on Lennox's shoulder. Now you continue your training. You become the officer you're meant to be. And maybe someday, if you want, you come find me. Phantom Reckoning can always use people who know what it's like to fight back. Lennox straightened, wiped her eyes. Yes, ma'am. As she walked away, Stone watched Kira carefully. You recruiting her, giving her an option, there's a difference. Is there? Kira didn't answer. She was already thinking about the next mission, the next name on the list. Holloway approached, gestured toward the admin building. We need to debrief, get your official statement, start the paperwork. They walked to the temporary CID headquarters, a conference room with white walls and fluorescent lights that made everything look washed out. Kira sat across from Holloway. A medical report lay on the table between them, bruised jaw, minor lacerations. Muscle strain from the obstacle course, nothing permanent, everything calculated. The trial will take 4 to 6 months, Holloway said, reviewing his notes. But with the helmet footage and the documented pattern of behavior, conviction is almost certain. You did good work here, Kira. Clean operation. What about the officers who participated in the harassment? 6 facing disciplinary action, 2 will likely be discharged. The rest get mandatory retraining and permanent marks on their records. Is that enough? Holloway looked up. It has to be. The system isn't perfect, but it's what we have. Kira nodded. She'd always known that justice was messy, incomplete, that some people would slip through cracks and others would face consequences that didn't fit their crimes, but it was better than nothing. What about you? Holloway asked. Medical leave reassignment. You've earned a break. Kira pulled a leather journal from her jacket pocket, set it on the table, opened it to the back page. 12 names were written there in careful handwriting. 6 of them had lines drawn through them, crossed out, complete. 6 remained. She looked up at Holloway. I want my next assignment. Holloway stared at her. After this, after 3 months of getting beat up and harassed, you want to do it again. Especially after this. Brennan was number 6. I have 6 more to go. Kira, sir, with respect, I know what I signed up for. My husband and 4 others died because someone decided his career mattered more than their lives. I won't stop until every person who made that same choice answers for it. Holloway was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled a folder from his briefcase, slid it across the table. Fort Benning, Georgia, Major Daniel Carver, suspected of abandoning a hostage rescue operation in Yemen. 6 soldiers captured, 2 killed in captivity. He's currently nominated for promotion to lieutenant colonel. Kira opened the folder, looked at the photo of a man in his mid-40s, smiling in dress uniform. Ribbons and medals, the image of military professionalism. When do I leave? 72 hours. But Kira. Holloway waited until she met his eyes. The moment things get dangerous, the moment you're at real risk, you abort. That's an order. Understood. I mean it, you're valuable. Too valuable to lose because you're trying to prove something. I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm trying to make sure 5 men didn't die for nothing. Holloway nodded slowly. For what it's worth, your husband would be proud. What you're doing, it takes a special kind of courage. Kira's expression didn't change, but something in her voice softened. He'd tell me I was being reckless and stubborn. Then he'd help me plan it better. Sounds like a good man. The best. That evening, Kira packed her belongings in the barracks. The room was empty, anonymous, like she'd never been there at all. Stone knocked on the doorframe. She turned. He held out a coin. Not a challenge coin. Something older. Worn edges, faded insignia. What's this? Kira asked. My unit coin. From Desert Storm. First deployment where I saw officers make calls that cost good soldiers their lives. He pressed it into her hand. For luck. And to remind you that not everyone in this life is a monster. Some of us are just trying to do right. Kira looked at the coin, felt its weight, added it to her collection of totems, dog tags, pendant. Now this, pieces of the people who'd believed in her, trusted her, helped her become the weapon she needed to be. I'll keep it safe, Master Sergeant. And I'll keep my eyes open, send you candidates, young soldiers who've got the fire but need direction. I'd appreciate that. After Stone left, Kira sat on the empty bunk and opened her journal to the back page. 12 names, 6 crossed out, 6 remaining. She picked up a pen and wrote beneath Marcus Brennan's crossed out name. Justice isn't loud. It's patient, and it never forgets. Then she closed the journal, stood at the window, looked out at the base one last time. A group of female cadets jogged past, their formation tight and synchronized. One of them glanced up at her window, saw her silhouette, straightened her posture mid-stride. The gesture was small, barely noticeable, but it carried weight, proof that what she did mattered, beyond courtrooms and case files, that every operation sent ripples through the ranks, changed how people saw strength, how they understood courage. Kira touched the pendant at her throat one last time, opened it. Inside, beneath the micro SD card, with its 47 seconds of damning footage, was the photo. Dominic on their wedding day, smiling that smile that could light up a room. She'd carried this pendant for 2 years, through 5 operations before this one, through bruises and insults and loneliness that cut deeper than any physical wound. But tonight, for the first time since Kandahar, the weight felt different, not lighter. She'd never be free of what she carried, but purposeful, like the burden had direction, like grief was turning into something that mattered. Kira closed the pendant, sealed it, hung it back around her neck where it would stay until the last name was crossed off. 6 more to go. She turned from the window, picked up her duffel bag, took one last look at the empty barracks room that had been home for 3 months. Tomorrow she'd be someone else, a different cover, a different name, walking into another base where another guilty man wore medals he didn't deserve. But tonight she was still Kira Ashford, widow, operative, hunter. The woman who'd learned that justice doesn't come from asking nicely. It comes from being willing to bleed longer than your enemies can watch. She walked out of the barracks and into the Colorado night. The stars were bright overhead, cold and distant and perfect. Somewhere in those stars, she liked to think Dominic was watching, proud of her, worried about her, wishing she'd find another way. But understanding in the way only a fellow warrior could that some debts can only be paid in truth. And truth she'd learned was the weapon that never missed. The door closed behind her with a quiet click. Fort Carson faded into the rearview mirror, and ahead in the darkness, 6 more names waited. She thought about Marcus Brennan, about the way his face had crumbled when he realized he'd been caught, about Lennox Hayes who'd found her voice, about Stone who'd proven that not all old soldiers were broken. And she thought about the words that had started this, the ones Marcus had thrown at her like weapons 3 months ago, standing in the morning light with 43 witnesses. Your husband's shadow won't protect you here, Lieutenant. He'd been right about one thing. She didn't need protection. She was the reckoning. Patient, inevitable. Hers. The engine turned over. Headlights cut through the darkness. And Kira Ashford drove into the night carrying her ghosts and her mission and the names of 6 men who thought they'd gotten away with abandonment. They were wrong. And somewhere between Fort Carson and Fort Benning, justice rode shotgun. Silent, relentless, waiting.